And I really do believe that every single person should be doing this for their own mental health and to have great relationships. So welcome everybody, this is Gull Khan, your money mindset expert, and we are talking today about the need to set clear boundaries. When you talk about boundaries, okay, what do we mean by boundaries? What do we essentially mean by boundaries? Well, a boundaries is a set of rules that you set for yourself. It's a way to tell other people. Now, when I say boundaries, it means with every other human being that you have a relationship with. It means every single person that you are interacting with, every single person that you have some sort of connection with. This includes, by the way, and it's not an exhaustive list, but this includes your husband, your wife, your mother, your father, your siblings, your cousins, your friends, your best friends, your work colleagues, the postman, the milkman, and whatever else. Every single human being that you come into contact with, you need to set clear boundaries with. Okay. Obviously, the closer the relationship, the more the need for essential clear boundaries. This is especially important for those of you who are actually mothers. So I know as mothers, we tend to really blur the line when it comes to our children, and I'm guilty of that also. I mean, I put my hands up to that. Less so nowadays. I do take care of myself more, and I do actually, the steps that I've got 11 steps altogether. The 11 things that I've got in that I'm going to talk about today, I practice those myself. So I sat down and wrote down the things that I do and how that's helped me to change my relationship with my children, and how that's changed my relation with my people also. Now, this also does mean that it does empower you. It doesn't mean that I've become this BITCH. I'm not at all, okay? But it's meant that I have a better relationship with my children. It means I'm getting less angry. I don't get angry at them as much. It means I get to enjoy my children's company more. It means I get to enjoy the company of my friends more because I've laid down clear boundaries. And because of these clear boundaries, if somebody comes into my energy field, which is not good for me, which is not healthy for me, and I'll give you an example. So before I get started with this, I'll give you a couple of examples. So recently, there's a client I had, and I will be taking, actually I'm not going to give her a name, absolutely not, but there's a client that I have who is currently on my friends list. I will be taking her out because I gave her a lot of time and a lot of space. She feels somehow that I sort of owe her too much, or she feels entitled to my time, to my energy. She asked me to do something which I didn't actually do, and in return, she's become very, because I refused to do that, because I wasn't able to do that particular thing for her, even though I was still willing to help her, whatever, she decided that, she was going to be ignoring me and start saying, about to me. She actually owes me money for one of my projects, for one of my things, and she's not, she says she'll pay when she has the money rather than actually paying when she's due, which is like a month ago. So my response to that was, I love her. She's an awesome woman. I love you. I'm going to bless you. I'm going to let that money go because that money's not going to become toxic. So we let that go. But I'm also going to take her out. She will no longer be able to take any more programs. She will no longer be part of my inner tribe, even though I still love her to bits. She's an awesome lady. But somehow her recent behavior has meant that I don't appreciate her to be part of my inner tribe, and therefore I'm eliminating her, even without thinking that she's not a bad person at all. She's a lovely person, but her behavior with me has crossed my boundaries, and therefore, even though she could go on to be another client in the future, I said no, I don't want you, and I'm taking her out. Okay, does that make sense to you guys? How important it is when you know your clear boundaries. When someone oversteps those boundaries, you can say no, and you can move away without feeling guilty, without feeling bad, without being rude. I haven't been rude to this client of mine, not at all. But I will not allow her in either. Does it make sense? There's another one. I had a friend who's actually awesome, great, and again, something that it's just the boundaries weren't clear, and she wasn't accepting the boundaries I kept laying. I gave her 1 option, 2 options, 3 options. She kept overstepping the boundaries, and so I had to pull away again, without being rude, without being offensive, just pulled away. Okay. A third friend of mine, somebody, another friend who he just, was everything. Friendship was meant on, on the person's terms. Again, you can't have anything. The point was, when people overstep my boundaries, now I recognize when they overstep my boundaries. So what I do, I pull away, I give them respect, I bless them, I love them, and then let go. Okay. Now that you can do with friends, that you can do with clients, that you can do with other things. You cannot do this with your children. You cannot do this with your with your family. You cannot do this with your mom and dad and so forth. Hence the need for very clear boundaries that you can set for yourself and actually help them and train them. Okay. Remember, people get used to treating you in a particular way, treating you how you allow them to treat you. If you start training everybody in your circle to treat you in a particular way, to actually respect your boundaries, then people will do that. And actually, as for those of you who are mothers, even more so, it's essential that you train your children to respect your boundaries. You are not a doormat. You're not there to do everything for them. You are there to actually help them develop. And at the end of the day, that's for you to be. Okay, so we're going to get cracking with this because I've got about 11 points to cover. I did write quite a few doing things down. Okay, so let's come back to this point. So what are boundaries? Boundaries are essentially, are essential for healthy relationships and for a healthy life. Please do actually share this video out to people who you think would benefit from this and actually can learn from the points I'm raising today. I think the idea of boundaries is so essential for every single one of us, whether you want to work, be a business person, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a housemaker or whatever you are. Setting clear boundaries is really essential for your healthy life, for a healthy lifestyle. Okay, so please do share this with everybody. Okay, so what does having healthy relationship mean? It means you know and you understand what your limits are. Let me repeat that. So what does having healthy boundaries mean? It means you know what your limits are. Okay, so there's a few steps for here. So step number one is, the very first step is logical. You need, and it's called identification. So for me, identification, you need to be aware of what your limits are. You can't set good boundaries unless you know what your limits. You need to understand you need to understand and identify what makes you uncomfortable, be it physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. You need to know what your limits are in all of those areas. If you don't, you're not able to set the clear boundaries, okay? And you need to work out where do you start becoming uncomfortable, where do you start getting stressed, where do you start feeling the pressure, and actually draw your line before that. So in any relationship, be it with mom and dad, or be it with your children, or be it with your husband or your wife, work out exactly where it is that you'll actually start at what point do you start feeling stressed, angry, annoyed, and most of all, when you start resenting the person. Okay, when you start resenting the situation, when you start resenting the whole situation, that is the very first one for you to think about. That is very essential for you to work out what exactly is your limits. Does that make sense? So number one is identification, and we need to address the 4 areas. Okay, we've got 4 areas. We've got first of all, you've got your physical limitations, you've got your emotional limitations, you've got mental and spiritual. All 4 need to be addressed. You can't just address one, you have to address all 4. Okay, and that's step 1. Now step 2 is actually tune into your feelings. Okay, now I hinted out of this in step 1. With your feelings, you've got 2 main feelings: discomfort and resentment. So every time someone oversteps your boundaries, and you know this actually intuitively, when somebody, it doesn't matter who it is, it could be a child, it could be a parent, it could be a spouse, it could be a friend, it could be a neighbor, anybody, when they start overcrossing your boundaries, your safe area, you start getting uncomfortable. You start getting discomfort, sort of takes over you. You become uncomfortable, and slowly, that discomfort, goes into resentment. Now you can actually do this very, very easily. Okay, you can actually do a scale to 1 to 10. So when you can ask a situation, the way I would do this is take any particular person and say, okay, so for example, your spouse, okay, saying a clear boundary with them. When my spouse doesn't listen to me, or on a particular, like for example, small things, by the way, small things end up leading to the big things. I'm gonna repeat that. Small things lead to the big things. So it could be small things in the house which ends up causing so much resentment that you have an outburst, and the outburst usually can be something completely different and completely minor, and you think, why did I have the outburst? Because all these small things build up, and then you have your big outburst, and you're shocked, like, why did I react so severely at such a small thing? That small thing was a tipping point. Everything else was building up, and that's why there's a need for these essential boundaries. So whatever emotion is, be whatever things. For example, I'll give you a common thing about housework. So when my husband, or my whatever example that comes to mind is about husband. My husband does not do the dishes. It makes me feel discomfort. It makes me feel uncomfortable. Do I resent him? On a scale of 1 to 10. Okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how annoyed am I? Anything above a 7, it's a red flag. Okay, so do it on a scale of 1 to 7 and ask yourself intuitively. If you, those of you who've done my clearings with me, I usually, when I ask you a question, I say, ask a question and ask it from your higher self, from your intuitive, your subconscious mind, or your higher self, whatever you want to call it. When you ask a question, get the answer in the first 3 seconds. The first 3 seconds is your subconscious mind or your intuition talking to you. Thereafter is your logical mind. Okay, so ask a question and get an answer. When you get an answer and you get an answer between 1 to 7, and 1 to 10, if it's above 7, know that that's a red flag. Okay, you may not even be consciously aware of this. You may not even know this annoys you so much, and you may work, for example, your husband not taking the dog out for a walk, or your wife not respecting your boundaries of going out with the lads or something, or your child, your daughter not doing, like, I'm not training my daughter to do the dishes, your daughter not doing the dishes herself or something. It could be something that you don't even realize actually bugs you so much. But when you start paying attention to it in this format and ask these questions on a scale of 1 to 10, so how much does this bother me from a scale of 1 to 10? I mean, you will have to do this with every single relationship, because you have to say, scale away is great to see and notice the energy if you cannot. Absolutely, Joanna, absolutely. And I'm a big fan of scaling, your emotions on a scale of 1 to 10. How do I feel? And you can work around it. But anything above 7 is a red flag. It's going towards from discomfort. If you imagine discomfort to resentment, if you're thinking about a question, obviously you're uncomfortable around it. But so if you imagine discomfort at one scale, like 1 or 2 makes you uncomfortable, it's uncomfortable, and anything above a 7 is going towards resentment, then you know what your issues are. Then you know that particular thing about that particular relationship bugs you. Okay, so do you need to do this every single relationship? And it may seem like a hard work, but it's worth the effort initially, at least those relationships that really matter, like your children, your parents, your spouse, your close friends, and even your work colleagues or team members. Okay. It's worth doing it with them. So the first one is awareness in terms of working out exactly what where you are in the 4 levels, and the number 2 is actually scaling out and working out where are you on the discomfort to resentment level, the 2 emotions. Okay, and they indicate where you are. Resentment, coming back to resentment, in this, resentment usually comes from the idea or the thought that you're being taken advantage of, okay, and you're not being appreciated. That's what really resentment means, and that could be in any capacity, as a from a work colleague, from your manager, from your family taking you for granted, your parents taking you for granted, so forth. Okay, it just means you don't feel appreciated. We as human beings have this innate need to be appreciated, to know that we are valued, and if we think that people are taking us for granted, we don't feel valued, and therefore we have this resentment towards these people. Does it make sense? The third step, okay, in all of this is communicating this to the other people. You have to communicate your boundaries to other people. Now, this can be tricky. Okay, this is tricky, and this is where I want you to understand. So there'll be 2 types of people. This will be for those of you who understand. People who are on your level, people who understand the kind of person you are, the people who people understand exactly, they get you. Okay, for them, you just have to sort of begin to indicate indirectly, no, this doesn't feel good for me, or that's not right for me, and whatever, and they'll appreciate you and they'll understand you. Okay, that's that. But there are others, and these people are like on similar wavelengths, or it could be even family members and so forth. But there are other people who are completely different to you in personality. For example, something that you think is offensive, somebody else may not think is offensive. For example, I think I'll give it a prime example, because I work with a lot of American clients. I had to adapt certain parts of myself to my American clients, because their attitude and their lifestyle is very different to our being British, because English people, we are very conservative. I think Melanie, you'll understand this. We are very conservative in terms of how we speak and how we are and how we're brought up, especially in considering my background is I was a barrister, so I come from an uber conservative background, and for me to be speaking and the way I do speak over here and start speaking to my American clients, it was very different. So initially, for me to set my boundaries, I would have to adapt and make sure that I wasn't offending them, and also understand they're not offending me. That's just they're human. That's just the way they are. That's just the people they are. Does it make sense? Okay. So you have to communicate it effectively to the person. Now, this is important, so you're not rude. Okay, so you are not rude, because you can be thinking, I'm not being rude, I'm just laying down my boundaries. And I'll give you another example. So I'll give you an example of my lifestyle. there's another friend of mine. Oh my God, she's an awesome girl. Okay. And I'm very, very fond of her. But because I can see it from the outside point of view, she can be very direct and very blunt. And there's another friend who's also very direct and very blunt. They're not being rude. But that's the way they are. That's the way they've been brought up. That's how the norm is, to lay down the boundaries in that manner. And unfortunately, at times they can come across as being rude and offensive. And that is where you have to be careful for. When people say, well, I'm just laying down my boundaries, I'm just, X, Y, Z. Well, yeah, you can and you should be doing it, but you should do it in a manner that's not offensive. Remember, when you communicate, the key to communication is not how you want to say it, is how the other person can hear you. Does that make sense, people? Okay, this is very important. But when you lay down boundaries, you don't spoil your relationships. You don't disrupt your relationships. You are laying down these boundaries so that you have a good relationship with people. You have good relationship with yourself and the people around you, not to disrupt your relationships with people around you. Okay, so that's important. So therefore, you communicate all of this, what your limits are and your limitations with people through a language that they can understand, where they will not get offended, and in a manner that they will understand. And with your children, for example, if your children are small, you need to make them understand in a language where they understand. So, for example, how I speak to my 6-year-old, my 7-year-old, I do not speak in the same way to my 11-year-old, okay? Because I speak in a language that she will understand and he will understand. The way I speak to my brother, or the way I speak to my cousins, is not the way I will speak to my uncle and my aunt. Because if I speak in the same manner to my uncle, he will get offended. Yeah, makes sense? Yeah, all good? Yeah, so it's important. So you communicate your boundaries very clearly, but in a language and in a manner that the other person can understand. And this is very, very important. You do not communicate in a way you want to. You communicate in a way the other person will understand. And this is the way to lay down healthy boundaries without offending people, without getting annoyed, without getting upset, and without crossing their boundaries. Okay, sometimes you say things which you end up crossing their boundaries, and that's what we don't want. Okay, we want to have healthy relationships, not cause arguments. Make sense? Awesome. Now, the fourth one, and this is really, really, I think this is absolutely essential for every single one. Give yourself permission to do this. Let me repeat it. Give yourself permission to lay down these boundaries. Unfortunately, most of the time we have guilt, fear, self-doubt, but and all these emotions which are big pitfalls which stop us from actually laying down these big boundaries. We always have this fear that, oh my God, if I lay down these boundaries, people will think I'm X, Y, Z, or I'm not I'm rude, or I'm inconsiderate, and I'm selfish, or whatever. Okay, boundaries are just a sign of a healthy relationship. They are a sign of self-respect. They are, if somebody is intelligent, is an intelligent person, and actually of a good understanding, and this includes your children. This includes your children. If somebody is a decent human being, they will understand the need for these boundaries, especially if you communicate effectively. So when I communicated my need for my space for my children, they understood. And it's a 7-year-old and 11-year-old. My daughter, I've explained to her that the need for her to help me out in the house, so she does it, and she understands that. My son understands that point about doing house chores, so he does it. And it was especially when it comes to my work, for them not to disturb me while I'm working, because that's my healthy boundaries. Again, if you communicate it effectively, these people will understand. But you have to give permission to yourself to do that. I have to give permission to myself. I had to give permission to myself. Yes, there are times when I'm going to switch off. There are times when I'm not going to do mummy duties. I just sit on the sofa. I don't do anything. This happened, by the way. So I sit on the sofa, I don't do anything, and I watch movies with them. And there are other times when I sit on the sofa and I tell them to go in the garden, because mommy needs some space just to be herself, by herself. I need some alone time. And that's fine. It's perfectly fine. So remember, people, give yourself permission to actually adhere to these boundaries. It's essential for your mental health. It's essential for your spiritual health. And it will, by the way, this helps to build relationships. Since I've laid down these boundaries, my relationship with my children has flourished. I'm not getting angry at them as much. I don't get angry at them hardly at all anymore. I'm having to discipline them less. I'm having to tell them off less, and they get to do more. The time we get to spend with each other is actually fun time. We do get to have lots of giggles and lots of cuddles and lots of fun time. because I've laid down these boundaries and I'm not constantly, disciplining them. I'm not constantly being a mother. I'm telling you, these are my rules. Don't overstep them. And when they do, they have the privileges taken away. So my Meagher is, back in the phone. Her phone gets taken away. My son loves his iPad and the phone. They're taken away. The TV's taken away. Whatever. I do discipline them when they cross those boundaries, but I've done it in a language which they understand. I mean, I give them, that is an example for me, because they are the most important people in my life, and therefore I need to, and with them was where most of my boundaries was getting really blurred. I was not setting boundaries. I kept thinking I had to be a mother 24/7 and I had to be a businesswoman, and therefore I was literally there was a time when I was doing 20 hours a day, literally from the point I would wake up to the point I would go to sleep. I would be doing 20 hours because I was cleaning after them, I was cooking for them, I was doing this for them. Not that I'm not doing it now, but I'm doing it in a way which is healthy. Does that make sense, people? Are you understanding? I keep giving my example because I think I'm being very transparent, and everything I'm telling you guys, I've done it myself. I'm not making this rubbish up. I'm doing it because these are practical tips that I've implemented in my own life. So it's very important you communicate in a way that they can hear. Then you lay down effective boundaries. Otherwise, if you don't communicate in a clear way, you are just causing friction. You are just causing havoc. You are just causing pain, and that is what you don't want. For this reason, it's essential that you actually give yourself permission to do this. Next one is actually practice self-discipline. So not wanting you to do this once, okay? You have to do this on a regular basis. Now, what do I mean by this, okay? You can't do this once and forget about it. You can't just do this once and say, okay, I've done it now, I've laid it, everybody understands. No, they don't, because what will happen is you'll start slipping into old kind of behavior. So you should do this maybe, once you've done this for every relationship and you sort of work out clear boundaries, what you do is on a monthly basis, if you can do it on a weekly, great. But if you can't do it weekly, on a monthly basis, spend an hour or so just looking at everywhere and how your month went. Audit your personal relationships. This is your personal life we're talking about, for God's sakes, okay? This is your time, your personal space, and your personal relationships. You can spend at least an hour on there or a month, okay? You can. So audit every single month and work out where it's happening, what's happening, how beneficial was it, how effective it was for you, where are the pitfalls, what can you improve on, what do you need to do, and so forth. Do that on a regular basis so that you know that you are only dealing with healthy relationships and you lay in clear boundaries. Plus, now this is another point. People will push your boundaries, including your children. So when you lay down a boundary once, they'll see if they can overstep it. They'll see if they can actually push you that much further. They'll see if they can push you and see if they can go back to the old way of doing things, the old pattern. That will happen, so that can slip in. And to prevent that, the best thing to do is to do it on a regular basis. So it's called auditing every single month. Make sense? Okay, that's step number 5. And by the way, I'm going to say once again, for those of you watching, if you are watching, please do share this. Share this video with those of you around you in your audience, because we don't know who needs to hear this. I don't know who is, and this is a no pitch, no BS training. I'm not pitching anything. There's nothing to sell. It's pure content, and I really do believe that every single person should be doing this and should be actually working on setting clear boundaries for their own mental health and to have great relationships. So this is the reason why I keep asking for that. Okay, so we're on step number 6.